the kind of ro-ro vessel that Finland would use in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. Now, this is a container. We'll come to containers a little bit in a moment or two. Now, this is a ship operated by Delphus, which is a Belgian undertaking, and it's on charter to Maersk. And that's a fairly standard container ship. Now, I've got some close-up pictures of Emma Maersk that I'll show you, which is a 15,000 TEU container ship. Now, one of the big issues that worries us in the container industry, not so much with ships of this size, but some of the smaller feeder ships, is that at the moment when a container is loaded to a ship, the shipper will declare the weight of that container, the tier weight of the box itself and the weight of the cargo in. Now, the shipper will obviously want to have the least weight, because if it's heavier, he will pay a higher tariff. So we are not convinced that all shippers necessarily declare the correct weight. Now, the one person that actually does know the weight of the box is the crane man, because he has a gauge in the cab. But at the moment in this industry, in this 2011, there is still not a dialogue between the crane and the ship. So what the ship's officers do in the vessel's loadmaster system, they load in all the weights that have been pre-programmed ashore. So they calculate the ship stability based on the weight that was declared. Now, on a big ship like 6,000 TEU ship, if a box is 2 tons more, it's not really a major issue. But if you've got a smaller feeder ship, which is 800 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent unit, it can be a big issue. And there was a ship up here called the Annabella a few years ago, where there was boxes stored in the hold, and there was a couple of empties stored low in the hold, and when loaded boxes were put on top, it collapsed. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but remember, on these small feeder ships, you've got 3 officers, right, to cover the 3 watches, 8 to 12, 12 to 4, and 4 to 8. And the captain is one of them. And the mate is responsible, the chief officer, for loading the ship. Now, there's a lot of pressure on these chaps, make no mistake. And these incidents occur. And one of the things we're doing in the Coastlink conference in Hamburg tomorrow, which is an organization I co-chair, is looking again at the loaded weight of boxes, particularly in smaller vessels, because it can impact on the ship's stability. Now, that's in the ice. These ships are ice class, as you can see, and that obviously is something. You get ice-strengthened bows, and I presume you've done that in your lectures, the importance of ice-strengthened hulls for ships going in up to the northern waters. Now, this is a slide. In fact, we're going on to tankers a little faster than I had anticipated. But BW Maritime is one of the very competent organizations that runs VLCCs, very large crude carriers. And this operation, as many of these companies are now, is totally international. Now, for example, Glasgow in Scotland is one of the largest ship management centers in the world. Now, what ship management is all about is managing other people's assets. The charterer will deal with the cargo in terms of sourcing it and deciding its origin and destination. The ship manager will actually manage the ship. He will crew it, he will insure it, he will maintain it, he will dry dock it, he will repair it, he will, to all intents and purposes, run that ship. The only situation that exists is that he will go where the charterer tells him to go. Now, Glasgow has got a concentration of ship management companies as big as anywhere in the whole of Europe. V-Ships being one, Stena being another, Northern Marine they are called, and there is TK Shipping, very big tanker operator, Norbulk. There's a whole range of them in Glasgow where all the manning is arranged. Now, hitherto, if you look back, I would say 15 years ago when I was in the Middle East, we had a lot of German senior officers, we had a lot of Dutch, a lot of Norwegian, we had Kiwis, which I'll come to later, and we had a lot of British and Swedish. But now, going to sea is not perceived to be so sexy. And people feel they want to be accountants and lawyers and things like that, for reasons I cannot personally understand. But going to sea is a fabulous career because you actually learn about the environment in which we live. You learn how to make decisions, because if you're in the middle of the Pacific, there's no one next door to assist you. You actually learn to improvise and make things happen. And it's a wonderful career, without any shadow of doubt. But North Europeans today do not see it that way. That's why, for example, a lot of your tanker masters today are Ukrainian or Russian, very well trained, I must add. You have a lot of Filipinos. You have a lot of crews from different parts of the Far East. And there is a whole change in the cycle of who mans ships today. Spain was very big one period in time. And so a lot of maritime nations were considered fundamental. But now you can see that VW Maritime, they've got offices in Singapore, in China, of course, which now will become this year the world's largest shipbuilder, this year or next year. Also the world's largest consumer of steel. They're in Norway, they're in India, the Philippines, France, and Romania. And when I was doing some work in Middle East, in Iran, believe it or not, in fact, we had a bit of a problem with the ship. And I was very surprised to learn that the steel work and abilities of the Romanian shipyards was of a very, very high order, without any shadow of doubt. And I was brought up in Northern Europe to believe that only Northern Europeans knew how to do this thing. Not so. There's a lot of very skillful maritime nations around the world. Now, Concordia, which is involved with the management of all the Stena ships, in fact, it might even be part of Stena. This is the Stena Poseidon. Now you see the tugs there. We'll come to tugs because they are a very important part of the support infrastructure. And if time permits, I've got a voyage which I want to talk to you about where the captain had to maneuver his ship in lots of places without tugs or pilots or bow thrusters or any of the modern gizmos. And that called for a different set of skills, I can assure you. So this is a fairly typical tanker. Very fine bleach Stena without any shadow of doubt. Now, this is one of the Panamax ice-class vessels, and they will have strengthened bows, of course, and strengthened hulls. Double hulls now is a mandatory thing for tankers. Well, it's mandatory for any new buildings. There's still a number of single-hulled tankers around, but they are gradually being phased out and replaced with the double-hulled vessels. So a Panamax is clearly one which can actually sustain the northern waters and the ice, but it can also transit the Panama Canal. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Now this is a C-Max. This is a Caribbean products carrier, and she can enter waters where draft is limited, and she is very commonly seen in the Caribbean, and this picture, I imagine, is going through the Panama Canal. I can't be sure, but I suspect it is. And there's another Afromax. Now that's one, the larger vessel. She will, well, she can deal, as you see there, with a meter thick ice, and the engines have to be of a certain power ratio to get through the ice. And she obviously will be suitable for trades around Africa. And I have a map which I must find, and it must have been misplaced at the beginning, where I'd quite like to return to in terms of the trade routes that vessels undertake. This is a P-Max, and these are all different varieties of tanker for different purposes, because they'll carry crude oil, they'll carry products, they'll carry, not these necessarily, but they'll carry chemicals. And when you think about it, I mean, this table, these chairs, the carpet, everything here will have chemicals of one form or another in it. And I don't want to divert to biofuels, but people sometimes forget that actually, whilst biofuels might seem an awfully good idea, you're actually not necessarily being that environmentally friendly with some of the processes, because you have to use chemicals in the production of biofuels. We won't have time to go into that today. Now, this is a new, unique prototype, the Stena Air Max, and this is a prototype, as you can see, where they're looking to see if future technology will facilitate air cushion strategy for vessels, presumably in inland waters, but I need to know more about this particular project. But this is the kind of initiative that's going on today. Now, when I was your generation, we were looking about pulling oil in great sort of, well, it was almost like big whale skins, that you were actually going to pull oil behind ships at one stage. There was all sorts of clever ideas as to how you would move oil. So there's so much technology going on now, partly driven, of course, by environmental factors. Now, there's tankers. This is this photograph, which I'll adjust, but This is from the website of TTS Ships Equipment. TTS is a big Norwegian, Swedish group, and they do a lot of work with ships equipment, with hatch covers, and much more. I mean, a lot of the equipment on ships comes from TTS, very innovative, and tankers represent about 27% of the world tonnage today. Now, an ultra-large crude carrier will be anything in excess of 350,000 deadweight tons. You'll be aware that deadweight is the weight of the ship and its cargo, and ballast water and fuel. Now, we in my Denham days, when we were involved, we were pioneers in this discipline called ship management. We had 2 ships at 550,000 deadweight tons, the Burma Endeavour and the Burma Enterprise, and I was on it, and it was awfully big. Not so many were ever built. There was, what, 20 or 30 probably at that size. You probably find that VLCC, which is really of the order of 250 to 325, was the dominant feature in the carriage of crude oils. And of course, you've got a lot of your oils. We have, of course, a lot of oil in the North Sea, but it's a lighter crude. If you go to a lot of the heavier crudes came from the Gulf. And these ships were regularly seen there. A Suezmax is one which is 125 to 170,000 tons deadweight. That's obviously transit through the Suez Canal. An Aframax is 80 to 120, and a Panamax is relatively small at 60 through 80, and a Handy is 40 to 60, and a Handy Max, I should say, and a Handy is 10 to 40, and the smallest is up to 10,000 tons deadweight. Some of these smaller ones will carry products. Now, these ships are the lifeline of the world until we come up with new sources of energy. And LNG, I should say, is emerging very much as the new fuel for maritime transport. And we're going to see a massive increase in that over the next 10 years, without any shadow of doubt. Bulk carriers, this is a fairly standard bulk carrier, similar in size to the Eden Bridge I was on, 150,000 tons. Well, no, she's not, because she's only 56,000. But we were 150. But this is fairly typical. You get bulk carriers up to 125, 140,000 tons deadweight. And of course, Australia is a massive source of commodities, as indeed in certain parts of South America. We will get coal into Northern Europe from South America. We'll get coal from Australia, and it's still more cost effective to ship it to Northern Europe than actually to produce it here and therefore consume it here. So there's a lot of things to be said about that, but bulk carriers are very much a backbone of the international shipping industry. Container transport, we'll talk a little bit about that. It's about 13–14% of the world's fleet. Now, a new LCV is an ultra-large container vessel, and I will tidy these slides up so that you see some of these statistics more clearly. But that's over 10,000 TEU. Now, Maersk, you may have heard in the news that Maersk have come out, and they are now they've just ordered what they call the Triple E version of container ships. Will be up to 18,000 TEU. They've been ordered from Daewoo in South Korea, and this Triple E stands for energy efficient and environmentally improved. They're going to build 10 of these monsters, carry 18,000 TEU, and that's 2,500 TEU larger than the Emma. Now let's just, for a minute, that's slide 21. Let's just come out of that for a minute, and let's see if we can find Emma here, because it would be appropriate to let you see this. I'm hoping it will open this time. Just to give you the scale of one of these